Hey, I'm Roland with Mobile Geeks, and this is the Nvidia Tegra Note 7. In this case, it's the version from EVGA, which is their European retail partner. It's been developed by Nvidia to actually make the Tegra 4 more popular. They couldn't get any design wins with the bigger manufacturers, or at least not many. There's a bunch of tablets using the Tegra 4 from ASUS or an HP, for example. And this is their try to realize a 7-inch tablet that is prone to be used for gaming because it has this very, very fast Nvidia Tegra 4 quad-core ARM Cortex A15 chip in there, running at 1.8 gigahertz. And yeah, we'll try and tell you if you should buy this device or if you'd rather get a Nexus, for example. And yeah, let's start with a tour around the device. As I said, Tegra 4 inside, using its 4+1 cores, so it has 4 high-end Cortex A15 cores, plus a secondary or an additional core that is for power saving. So whenever you're turning off the screen and you just have the device laying around, for example, it will switch to that core and try to save power to actually make the battery run longer. We have a 7-inch screen, 1280 by 800 resolution, so it's only a WXGA resolution, not a full HD resolution as on the Nexus 7, for example. So it's not as sharp and not as crisp as on the Nexus 7, for example, but it is still a decent screen. So you have an IPS panel that has decent viewing angles. If you look from the sides, you'll see that the viewing angles are very stable actually. The brightness is all right. It's not the brightest screen actually. For inside your house when you're gaming, it is totally all right, even at night outside. But in the bright sunlight, you're going to have some problems reading that screen. Apart from that, we're dealing with 2 big front speakers right here, which are doing a good job at keeping you entertained. So the sound is pretty good. There's even some bass in there, which will actually make you like this configuration, having both speakers on the front, like HTC has been doing on their HTC One, for example, and a couple other manufacturers, like even Samsung, for example, has their speakers on the front of the device. There's one big disadvantage to this is when you hold it like this for gaming, for example, you will very fast end up covering the speakers on the front. On the front, there is a tiny VGA camera up here and the brightness sensor as usual. On the back, we have a 5-megapixel camera right there that has a constantly turned on HDR mode, so that should give you pretty decent photos. The pictures that we did weren't the best. I mean, it's still a 5-megapixel camera only, and it lacks a flash, so you're not much to expect right there. But it's definitely a good thing to have this camera in there, because just in case, whenever you might have to make a picture, and it's pretty handy to have one available, right? And on top, we have the on and off button, which is in a decent position up there. It's just kind of hard to actually reach it, and it's not the most easy button to press, but it's definitely a good position up there, and it does what it's supposed to. Right next to that is the 3.5 millimeter headset jack, so you can always hook this up to your stereo or just plug in some headphones. This is a micro HDMI out, which is good if you want to hook this up to your TV. There's one thing about this is that the plug, if you plug it in, is probably not going to hold very good because the port is kind of wanky and wonky. It is not the most stable port, so you got to make sure that you don't move the device too much to not have the picture on the screen go away because the signal just cuts out. Right next to that is a USB OTG capable micro USB port, so you can hook anything from the charger to your USB devices up to that using special adapters, but it's definitely able to use this as a connection to your memory card or even USB sticks or whatever, so you can copy stuff off of that. On the side, on the right side, we have a micro SD card slot in which you can use cards up to, I think, 32 gigabytes, so you can extend the internal storage that is only available in 16 gigabytes. 16 gigabytes is pretty good, but It's always good to have the option to expand it. Right next to that is the volume rocker. Works just as it's supposed to, doesn't wobble or anything, so it's pretty well done on that. On the bottom, we have a special thing about the Tegra 7 or Tegra Note 7. This is a capacitive stylus, so we'll get to that later. It's definitely just it's a nice to have add-on, but it can't replace a digitizer, right? On the bottom, this is just another outlet for the speakers. So when you cover up the front, you will still hear something. Maybe that's why Nvidia put this in there. The back has this kind of dotted design, reminds me a bit of the old Nexus 7, for example. We have big areas that are covered in matte plastic, which still attracts a lot of fingerprints. Up here we have the EVGA logo, so that's where the OEM logo goes. On there, there's always going to be Tegra notes on there, which tells you, yes, this is the Nvidia tablet. The casing itself is not of the most, it's not the super highest quality, because when you hold it like this and it starts creaking a bit, so I don't know if you can hear that. Well, you're probably not going to hear that, but it's basically kind of a bit of a wobbly construction right there, so maybe Nvidia should invest into that a bit more. It's fully made out of plastic. It doesn't feel cheap, but it's not. It's basically mediocre quality, and you might want to consider another device if you're looking for a super high quality casing. But again, this is only a $200 device, so that's actually, you get what you pay for, right? The size of the screen, or the bezel around the screen, is not the smallest, but it's actually a good thing to have a bit of a bezel right here, so you can use it with bigger hands like mine and don't always end up touching the screen. There is palm rejection in here, but that only works when you pull out the stylus. The areas on the sides, that's actually a pretty good idea to leave a bit of room, so makes it easier to hold when you're in a gaming mood. The thickness of the device is at 9.6 millimeters, so that's pretty average for a 7-inch device. The whole thing weighs in at 320 grams, so that places it right in the middle between the Apple iPad mini and the new Nexus 7 from Google. There's 1 gig of RAM in here, which is totally fine, because the CPU, or the Tegra 4, is making the amount of memory in there not really matter at all anymore, because you can still reach very high benchmark levels. So this goes up to 35,000 points in Antutu benchmark, for example. So that just goes to show how powerful that chip is, because that's actually more than you get on a Snapdragon 800 in a Tegra, in a Galaxy Note 3, for example. So gaming is just as smooth as the benchmarks. So all the games that I tried, so we have up here Dead Trigger 2, Anomaly 2, Shadowgun Dead Zone, Real Racing, GTA, Riptide, Asphalt 8, and a bunch of others. They all run very smooth. You even have access to the Tegra Zone, which is down here, which is one of the apps that Nvidia actually pre-installs. My internet connection is really bad right now, so I can't really show you that. The games that you download from Tegra Zone are specially modified games from the developers that are working with Nvidia, so you get a couple of more effects in there. They make games look a bit better, but all the other games that we tried are totally smooth on this, because this is actually a very good gaming device, because the power that it has is totally enough. There's one big downside to that, to all the power that this chip has, which is it has a problem with heat dissipation. So on the back right here, when you start gaming and you keep gaming for a while, the back will get very hot. You'll end up having temperatures up here of around 110 Fahrenheit or 45 degrees Celsius, which is actually quite a lot for a tablet to put out. And another big disadvantage is, because of all that power, the battery life is not going to be the best when you're gaming on this device, or when you're really using it for hardcore gaming. Let's go down to the battery menu right here. So this has been running for an hour or something. I've been doing a quick, just a short gaming session, so it's already gone down to 88%, which is also because the screen is at the highest brightness and stuff, but still, after 2 or 3 hours, you're gonna have to recharge the device again because the battery is going to be running out. It is a 4,100 milliamp hour battery, which is a pretty decent size for a device like this. It should give you 10 up to 13 hours, is actually what we reached in regular usage without gaming, just surfing the web through Wi-Fi and having the screen set at 50 to 75% brightness. So that should give you a decent experience on the surfing side, but when you start gaming, it's probably only going to last up to 3 hours at full blast if you're really cranking up the screen and are using a high-end game that actually taxes or uses all the power that the CPU in this thing has right here. As I mentioned earlier, Nvidia is actually integrating a stylus into the device, and they're combining this with a bunch of apps. So we have Tegra Draw right here, and we have a writing app. So Write is just for note-taking, and the Tegra Draw app is for drawing. In Write, it will just use the stylus in any direction that you like as a basic pen to actually take notes and write stuff. But the drawing app is actually using a feature that this stylus pen right here has that is pretty neat. What they've done is they've integrated a tip that is slightly angled, so you can actually use this with different pen or brush widths, and it will help you do some drawing and stuff on this, but it's still not a digitizer pen, so you won't get the same accuracy or pressure sensitivity that you are maybe used to from a stylus that is an active stylus or a digitizer. So this is just for note-taking and maybe a bit of drawing, but it's not a professional stylus that some people that have been using digitizer pens are going to appreciate a bit more. So it's still just a gimmick on this. But it's a nice addition for a device that is only $200. So what's my impression of the Tegra Note 7? I think it's a pretty good example of how a big company like Nvidia is trying to make its chip more popular, and working with the smaller OEMs actually gives them the chance to compete in markets where Nvidia wouldn't be able to get any design wins. So we have EVGA, Zotac, and Gigabyte, for example, and I think even HP putting out this device under their own brand names, so they can actually reach a lot of markets. The power is awesome. It is just above 35,000 points in Antutu, as I said, and the gaming stuff works totally well because it is a very powerful CPU. You will always have to deal with a bunch of battery issues, but that's just the case on just the same thing as on other tablets. The casing is not of the most highest quality, but it is well built, but it's still, well, kind of mediocre. The weight is totally fine. The power is a lot, even though it only has 1 gig of RAM. Using a standard Android 4.4.2 KitKat on here is a good thing. Nvidia only adds in a bunch of smaller additions, so they have these special icons so you can actually lock the device for only using the pen, and have a bunch of other drawing features in here. Plus, they give you the Tegra Zone, which lets you have access to specially modified games that offer more visual bling, that's what I would call it, to make it look good on here. So for $199, that's actually a pretty good device, except the only points that I'm basically whining about is just the quality on the casing and the screen resolution, which definitely should be higher on this, but that would also drive up the price, so they probably stayed away from that to keep the price down at just under $200 US. So I was rolling from Mobile Geeks, checking out the Nvidia Tegra Note. See you later.